Now we're really leaving out one key component to this whole Chicago deal. And that component is the basis for why this deal is happening in the first place. Gunless, right? We've talked on the next steps for Chicago ahead of the Seattle home series, right? How they may shape up moving forward, how the influence of Prestinni will now affect the team. But what are the next steps for Gunless? Right? Where does he go from here? Because you think based on the results that he's had since he became a pro, that teams would be flocking to him, right? That teams would be dying to get him on their franchise. But the reason why I don't believe we'll see the entire league make a move is because of the track record, because of the pattern that we've seen since the beginning on E United, right? More than any other CDL starter right now, Gunless has been on more pro rosters since Infinite Warfare than any other player. 7 organizations, and it's about to be his 8th. E United, FaZe, Echo Fox, Rise Nation, Luminosity, Envy, Chicago Huntsmen. For a player of Gunless's skill level, I'll let you know, this isn't normal, right? For new players that have recently joined the CDL, or for guys that have maybe kind of just made the cut over the last few seasons, right? 4, 5, maybe 6, that's kind of not all that strange, right? That's kind of normal. But to have a player who beats all of them out and to be as good as he is, this is abnormal, right? You can look back at pretty much every title since Infinite Warfare. At some point, we had the conversation, Gunless is top 5 in the world, right? At some point, either at the end of the game, in the middle of the game, the start of the game, whatever it may be, Gunless was in the top 5 player in the world conversation, right? The constant switching, franchises see that, right? They see the top 5 conversations, but they also see the fact that he has moved consistently. They see the pattern, they see the process. And this is the way that the process has gone, right? This is the step-by-step process for a majority of teams that Gunless has been a part of. Number 1, you join the team, right? Number 2, pretty much early on in that team to player life cycle, he wins them a championship, right? He delivers a championship. Number 3, team quickly after that, or maybe somewhat recently after that placement, ends up struggling in placements. Number 4, internal problems begin to take over even more. Number 5, roster change ends up happening, most likely involving Gunless. He either benches himself or the team decides to take that upon themselves. Listen, the idea of constantly team switching and winning teams championships, having internal problems, moving on, that worked in the pre-franchise era. But spoiler alert, that doesn't happen anymore, right? It doesn't work nearly as well as it used to. Roster changes have never been more difficult than they are right now. Not just because of franchising, but because we are in year 1 of franchising, right? Every franchise team is trying to get an idea of what they're working with. They want to see how all the pieces are meshing. They want to see exactly what the landscape is looking like. By no means do they want to get off to a shaky start, right? Franchises aren't willing to bargain as easily as they used to because they've got a very solid amount of money on the line that's invested, right? They're looking to get the return. The last thing a franchise wants is to shake the boat around, right? They want a consistent winning team that can be around for a while. Listen, do you ever notice that some of the best players in professional sports, and this applies to esports at times, but the very best of professional sports players, they typically don't move from team to team all that often, right? A majority of top caliber players usually kind of stay somewhat on the same path. They stay with organizations for a while, right? That's the way that these franchises, in a sense, are thinking as well, right? Players can't just walk away like they used to. Organizations now have the rights. They hold over the players more than they ever have before. Like I said, franchises, they don't want to shake things up, right? Despite the 6 championships and the 4 MVPs, arguably should have been 5 MVPs for Gunless since he started in Infinite Warfare. Taking him on is a risk, right? And that isn't just my opinion. That shows he typically doesn't stay around for very long. To give an example, on the 3 teams that he's been on the bench with, E United, Luminosity, and Huntsmen. Let's go over this. On E United, 3 months after delivering the organization their first ever championship back in Atlanta, 3.5 months later, Gunless goes to the bench. On Luminosity, 2 months after winning CWL Fort Worth, Gunless goes to the bench. on the Chicago Huntsmen just under 3 months after winning the London home series. Considering the fact that the league also went on break because of COVID, Gunless goes to the bench. Like I said, he's a winner, right? He has that winning mentality. We learned that based on the conversation that he had with Hex on the eavesdrop. And I think Gunless is a great guy. Right? I've never had a bad interaction with him, but he is becoming the common denominator in these teams, right? The figures showed that. The numbers showed that. Even the accounts of the players show that. Gunless has to work on his reputation. You can be a great player, but if you start to become a bad teammate, that can hurt you, especially when your teammates can influence decisions. But in light of the discussion on teammates, who will be Gunless's next franchise, right? What's the team that he goes to next? And if he does, in fact, go to one, considering there is a chance that teams, do want him, that they can possibly afford him, considering the fact that there is a luxury tax in the CDL that does affect teams if they go over the $1.6 million cap, etc. If there is a chance that that can happen, let's talk about that a little bit. Now, I've got 3 teams in my eyes that I think will start to show interest and actually do have the ability of being the next landing spot for Gunless. The first one, the Los Angeles Guerrillas. Now, the reason why I think the Guerrillas could be an option is first, they should be low on cap space in a certain sense. Now, they've got 2 rookies on the team in Vivid and Spart, but they really don't have a main marquee player. Now, I do mention cap space, also realizing that they do have kind of their old teams still on the bench as far as we know. I don't know their contract details on whether LAG can just drop them whenever they want, if those players have guaranteed money, etc. However, LAG's roster change clearly hasn't worked for the better like many thought. Despite my thoughts on this team possibly getting better after adding the 3 young guns, they are 1-4 since their team was dramatically changed. They'll be playing in a group this weekend in Seattle that's full of close talent. Right, New York are on the rise. Seattle's looked a little bit better as of recent. Now they're going to be bringing back Enable. London are usually tough. It wouldn't surprise me if we do see a new-looking team very soon for LAG, either heading in or directly coming out of Seattle. Based on this team's performance in the Seattle home series, I think the Guerrillas will try a new look. If they have the space, they very well could take a look at Gunless, right? And Gunless's mentality may still be on joining, right, one of the top of the line teams. But he may, depending on the availability, depending on the way the teams perform, depending on cap space, he may have to adjust that filter moving forward. And he may be interested in starting from the ground up. It depends on where his mentality is, but he has to be open to extra options. Speaking of options, the next team, Seattle Surge. I'll be honest with you right now. I think for Gunless's sake, this is the best option available. I think if there was a team that could handle the personality, handle the weight, it would be Seattle, right? Veteran players that have been waiting on a star. I mentioned at the very start of the season for Seattle, they are missing a piece to get them over the edge. They are still missing that one Slayer that could lead them to a championship. Gunless could be that. And I think the reason that he could work with this team compared to others is that this roster can probably handle a dominant personality, right? You have veterans, you have seasoned players that can get in the comms, get the team back on track. A lot of rosters can't handle that. Right? A lot of teams aren't built for that right now. This team is built for another star, and they have excellent assisting pieces. Now, there was a rumor that went around not long ago discussing that Octane in the offseason did not have interest in wanting to play with Gunless because of possible personality clashes. And I totally understand that, right? Clearly, that has been a very sound claim. However, if you are the Seattle Surge, a team that predicted by many was supposed to be top 5, if not top 3, and halfway through the season, the only thing that they can kind of put on their record is that they have beaten the Los Angeles Guerrillas, and that's it. Right? The only time that you've made it to top 4 was, in fact, the last event that you played at. But the way that you got there was by beating those darn Los Angeles Guerrillas twice. That's it. Right? Those are the only results that you can really show for it. Right? If you are the Seattle Surge, you better be taking a look at Gunless. Unless you have an exceptional home series, Octane and the Surge are going to need to be more flexible about who comes in. Because While Gunless has shown he isn't easy to work with, there is no denying the skill that man has. Right? There's no denying that he's won championships and can lead teams to championships. Right? You've got a guy who's motivated probably more now than he's ever been to deliver. And this is an organization that needs to start delivering. If I haven't made it clear, I like this move. I think this would be the most ideal. Obviously, based on cap space, that's a conversation that we don't know all the details about regarding the Surge. But based on the team that they were wanting to get in the offseason, I'm imagining that their horizons, their opportunities are probably still somewhat big. But if possible, I think that this one makes the most sense. I think the Surge, if they have the ability to, would be crazy to not look at someone like Gunless. Finally, the last team, the Los Angeles Optic, right? This one I think is also very likely. I've talked a lot about OGLA and how happy I was to finally see this team beginning to reach new heights, because I think OGLA really considers this one, right? I think this one tempts OGLA, and I think this one tempts Slasher, right? Do we remember what happened the last time that Slasher, TJ, and Gunless teamed up? Do we remember the top 16 finish at champs? Of course we do. But do we remember what happened before that? Right, the back-to-back championships that Rise Nation had at Seattle, at Anaheim back in World War II. There was a time, a very, very short moment in time, that we talked about, could they, being Rise Nation, be a dynasty? Right? That conversation happened. Clearly it didn't work out, but that team was terrifying, right? Now, I want to point this out. It is important to note that team was full of big personalities, and that's the ultimate reason why they didn't end up sticking together. Top 16 finish at champs obviously didn't help anything whatsoever. However, I have heard two very similar interviews recently. One with Slasher after a CDL match, and one that Gunless did with Hex. For both of these guys, their focus is solely on winning. In those two interviews, that's what the talking point was. Focus on winning. Focus on getting better. Championships, right? Knowing what your future has ahead of you. That is what they're focused on. They want to win. They want to improve. Will they step on toes? Sure. But that doesn't matter because they want to win. And they share that same mentality, right? OGLA, Slasher specifically, I think he wants Gunless. I think at the very least, he's interested in the idea of what could happen if they teamed up again. Now, do I think they could win? You're darn right I do, right? Imagine this team. Slasher, Gunless, Kenny, Dashy, TJ. That is an all-star team if I have ever seen one, right? Do I think they would win? Absolutely I do. Do I think they'd mesh well long-term? You'd be out of your mind if you thought that, right? Salary cap could be a problem, right? Obviously, the big talking point, do you move J-Cap to coach now that we no longer see Pac-Man on the team? I don't think they should make this move at all, right? Despite the talking points, that is where I think that OGLA, or rather Slasher's mind is at for now. But I think the last thing that OGLA needs, despite how tempting it would be for them to have that five-man lineup, the last thing that this team needs is slaying power, right? They need better teamwork. They need to kind of be better on improving themselves, right? There were times throughout the most recent event, the Florida Home Series, where these guys were slaying out despite Chino going double negative, right? Chino's only going to get better. He's only going to learn this team's tendencies better. He's only going to learn the game better. He can be that same piece that Enable was 200 Thieves. Salary-wise, team-wise, this move for this team doesn't make sense. I think there's a very real chance this could possibly occur. There's going to need to be some pieces moved around. I don't think they can afford them, at least for this current moment. We're going to need to see some pieces start to shift a little bit. But it wouldn't surprise me if we do see OGLA try to make a move. Where I'm at right now, I think that at least in this moment, I think that Seattle is the best option. But those are my three teams that I think Gunless has a real chance of going to. Ones that I think are the most realistic. But listen, there's going to be some interesting moves ahead of Seattle and post-Seattle, right? The results from that home series very well could define where we see Gunless go for the rest of the season.